Hello everybody. Our next game we play host to Aston Villa at the Olympic Stadium. Kick-off on Monday is 8 p.m. The match being selected for broadcast by Sky. Now lads, this had better be good. The kick-off time will mean cutting short my weekly half hour in the company of the delightful Victoria Corin Mitchell on Only Connect. The Eyes Up Mother Brown people will be giving their insight into matters, if you haven't got Sky. You don't get people with boomerangs on Sky, I suppose. So then, Villa. Well, it's been an odd season for them so far. They won their first 4 games, having started a week later due to Manchester City's involvement in Europe. They commenced with a 1-0 home win over Sheffield United. This was followed by a 3-0 win at Fulham and the hilarious 7-2 win over the Scousers, who've been moaning about everything ever since. They followed that up with a 1-0 win at Leicester, the 100% record at that stage leaving them in second place. The following 4 games were somewhat less productive points-wise. They lost 3 of those 4, all at home, against Leeds 3-0, Southampton 4-3, and latterly Brighton 2-1. The one exception during that period was the 3-0 win over at Arsenal, just before the international break. All of that leaves them in 7th place, a place and a point above our good selves. That's before the weekend games, of course. Having flirted dangerously with relegation last term, their 1-1 draw at our place being enough to keep them up in the end, they spent a few bob in the transfer market. Daisy, the socially distanced, support-bubbling personal assistant with the beautiful smile, informs me that the largest fee paid was the £28 million sent down to Brentford in return for Ollie Watkins. That's around 40% of the cost of Brentford's new ground, and isn't a bad return on the £1.6 million Brentford are reported to have paid Exeter for him in the first place. The trip up the M40 reunited Watkins with Dean Smith, his old boss at what was then Griffin Park, and Watkins was the main tormentor of Liverpool in the 7-2 win, netting the so-called perfect hat-trick in the process. £17 million, possibly rising to 20, was the fee paid to Arsenal for Emilio Martinez. The Argentina-born custodian looked quite impressive in the run into Arsenal's season last year, or this year, or whenever it was, having replaced the injured Bernd Leno. Indeed, Martinez had a decent game in the Cup final and was also in the side that won the Charity Shield, to give it its proper name. However, he didn't seem too impressed with the prospect of being relegated back to the racing car seats and was heard to make noises suggesting that, if he were not considered to be the number 1 choice between the sticks, he'd rather move on. That was enough to see him dropped from the squad for the opening league match against Fulham, and he ended up at Villa Park shortly after, endearing himself to everybody, with the possible exception of Tom Heaton, by saving a penalty on his debut against Sheffield United. Another £17 million went out to Lyon for midfielder-cum-striker Bertrand Traoré. Traoré's start in professional football was a little bit, dodgy. He played at junior level for Chelsea without ever having gone through the formalities of signing for the club. This was despite illegal payments having been paid to his mum. Chelsea also paid school fees to the Whitgift School in the hope that the player's English would improve, seemingly oblivious to the fact that the school's actually located in Croydon. Having paid a fine and had a transfer ban imposed as a result of the irregularities, Chelsea ended up adding the player to their loan stock when he did finally sign properly, and he spent a couple of seasons in the Netherlands with Ajax and Vitesse before Chelsea cut their losses and flogged the player back to his native France, where Lyon won whatever race there was for his signature. He fell out of favour there in latter years, and with no European football on the menu for 2020-21, Lyon were happy to take the dosh for a player who, thanks to that expensive education, could probably say "in it" in a perfect Croydon accent. We ourselves were among a number of clubs interested in signing Forest fullback Matt Cash back in January. However, the player elected to stay put until the end of the season, obviously unaware that he would actually be spending summer by playing. Having failed to gain promotion at Forest, he moved westward across the Midlands for £14 million, plus another potential £2 million in add-ons. They have, of course, got the obligatory Chelsea loan arrival. He was Ross Barkley, but he'll be absent with a dodgy hamstring, so I won't harp on about him for any length of time. Their golden boy at the moment is Jack Grealish. Good player, but a bit of a twat, was how Daisy summed him up, and who am I to disagree? He's recently worked his way into the England setup, but given Southgate's propensity to treat player responsibility more seriously than the players clearly do, he may find himself hoping that Southgate has a short memory the next time the squad is announced. Grealish has spent this week pleading guilty via his lawyers for a string of driving offences, the first of which occurred during the first lockdown. He ended up damaging a couple of cars in Solihull, whilst driving in odd slippers and smelling of intoxicating liquor. Probably not the greatest of disguises to use in the Birmingham area, one would have thought. More recently, he was found tailgating at 98 miles per hour on his way to training, or driving like an arse, as it is known. Something tells me that he'll be cadging lifts to work for the foreseeable after the verdict and sentencing is announced in a couple of weeks. And so we move on to the wild and wacky world of association football. The smell coming out of Merseyside got just that little bit more pungent as the refereeing community capitulated to Liverpool once more. Having appointed David Coote, admittedly a poor referee in and out of the bunker, as the VAR for the Scousers match against Leicester, there was a quiet, discreet cough from Anfield, whereupon Coote was mysteriously replaced by PGMOL for operational reasons. His replacement, Andre Mariner, then managed to get through nearly 10 minutes of the Leicester match before denying Leicester a penalty that would have been given at any other ground in the country, and certainly would have been given at Anfield up the other end. Liverpool, it seems, are unique in the league in being able to pick officials, and they are deemed worthy of having written explanations every time PGMOL accidentally give a throw-in against them. Were I Leicester, or indeed pretty much any other club, I'd be sending a copy of the laws of the game into the authorities and requesting a written explanation as to why they don't appear to apply to Liverpool. Still on Liverpool, it was of course announced that both Salah and Mane, both of whom have got the art of simulation down to a fine art, have been nominated for FIFA's World Player of the Year thing. We shouldn't be too surprised really. After all, you'd be hard-pressed to find a more bent or corrupt organisation in world sport than FIFA. It's appropriate that the nomination should uphold FIFA values, I suppose. Maradona? Well, I'd never celebrate the death of a human being, whatever their sins of the past. However, some of the eulogising has been a bit, well, what have the Romans ever done for us, in my opinion? With any rent-a-quote piece usually starting with, well, apart from the drugs, prostitution, unacknowledged illegitimate offspring, Camorra connections, match-fixing, etc., etc. I think I'll just leave that one there. Slightly better news is that we've now had the announcement that limited numbers of supporters will be allowed into matches from the home match against Man United, London being in Tier 2 of the COVID League. 2,000 supporters will be allowed back in, the attendees being chosen by ballot. Let's hope that that works out okay. After all, our record with ticketing in recent years hasn't been the greatest. I may be wrong, but I believe they are still unable to give people any idea of their exact place on the season ticket waiting list. Which brings us on to us. It's a good victory last weekend and proof that organisation and hard work, whilst vital, will only get you so far in the Premier League. You'll win the odd game here and there, but without some sort of class somewhere in the mix, you'll end up finding your level. We had something extra in every area of the pitch last weekend, and whilst they'll point to their hitting the bar when they should have scored, that would really be papering over the cracks as far as the blades are concerned. Bothered? Nah. The Haller debate lingers. A lot of the stuff that people get on his back for is the sort of thing that will go unnoticed if you're not actually looking for it, or the TV people don't point it out. He did a lot of tracking back last week, rarely winning the ball back, but his presence would often contribute to a turnover of possession. I actually liked the goal non-celebration, which, whether you take it straight or with a heavy side order of irony, is a lot less tiresome than some of the choreographed stuff players are prone to these days. A manly handshake and, if it was a particularly good goal, maybe a pat on the back should always suffice. On the injury front, the extra week, plus the weekend, should see Antonio involved in the squad. I think Haller did enough for another start though. Yarmolenko is still under quarantine, having been present in the company of COVID-positive colleagues. A word of advice, Yarmo. Change your name to Salah and the rules change. Or so it seems. So the prediction then. It's a tricky one this week, as much depends on which Villa show up. They're very Jekyll and Hyde at the moment, and all week I've had a draw bouncing around my head. However, in the last 24 hours, for some reason my gut feeling has changed. No idea why, but on this occasion I shall be placing the £2.50 I was going to send to the Jack Grealish Bus Pass Fund on a home win. So, Mr. Winston, please instruct your turf accountancy shop employees to wager that lot on a 2-1 home win. That would be splendid. Enjoy the game.